Lumen, and this is StarCraft 2. What I have for you here is the evil one, playing as the Terran forces in the upper left-hand corner, with Soda, playing as the Zerg in the bottom right-hand corner of the map. From here on out, when I call out a comparison, such as supply, workers, or army values, or anything like that, the first number is going to represent the Zerg player, with the second being the Terran. So right now, when I say 13 to 14 workers, 13 workers is for the Zerg player, 14 workers is for the Terran. Not entirely sure who wins this match. I don't like paying attention to those numbers. I like keeping this a little bit of a mystery as we go along and be able to see how the battles play out. Any kind of odd or strange strategies that might pop up. Although I might need to start paying attention if I'm going to be casting more and look for kind of those oddity kinds of games or builds. We do have a fast hatchery by the Zerg player before the spawning pool. Looks like 16 and 16. I wonder if he did a cancel. Which I'm kind of curious. Oh, is he going to do the cancel here? Is that what's going to happen? No, we have an extractor first, and then the spawning pool. If I didn't know if I didn't know any better, that this might be going into a fast Mutalisk open, because basically you gain your gas as fast as possible in order to get to a lair. But I do that against the computer because I'm dumb. And basically, I just try to work up that tech tree as fast as possible and to get as many Mutalisks on the map as possible. I have been playing around with the fast hatchery and basically just trying to figure out when I can build as many Mutalisks as possible to overwhelm my enemy. Because, like, especially when it's an early game or early on in the game, and you have just a sizable force or air force, you can do a lot of damage because there's not much that the enemy can normally do against several Mutalisks at the 4 and 5 minute mark. Unless they are pumping out like just a lot of anti-air capabilities such as Marines, missile turrets, or anything like that. Both sides do look like they are building up for the economy, and oh, we have a little bit of a... Does anybody die? I believe this is Master League 2, by the way, for those curious. I got this on the replay site, or StarCraft2 Replay site. So this Reaper does get shooed away just a little bit by this Queen, and it is looking rather menacingly. I wonder if the Queen can see it. Nope. Okay, there we go. A little bit of back and forth. Reaper is going to do as much harassment as possible. And the good thing about doing stuff like this is that it keeps your opponent on their heels. It constantly forces them to pay attention to something else and not have a focused mind toward the economy or anything like that. And so because this was happening, less attention was being put on this overlord, or looking at what's going on over here, or trying to scout out your opponent. We do have a pretty standard 1-1-1 opener by the Terran, which gives them a lot of different options up this tech tree to build, and it looks like we're just going to have a lot of Hellions with some supported by some Marines. This is quite the daring Reaper here. Zoom in. Look at that, just like pissing off those Queens as much as possible. Can you imagine just like being this Reaper here? I feel like a Queen would be like a boss, like a mini boss in an MMO, and this would be like, oh, yeah, it died. And these characters would be just like that one. Wow, there's a third hatchery. I totally missed that. Yeah, as I was just running my mouth, it's a third hatchery does go up for the Zerg player. The Zerg really investing a lot in the economy. Now, it does take some time for the economy to build back as a... oh, wow, a lot of drones go down. 19 drones go down. This is going to be one tough fight for Zerg to come back from. Going in for that second mineral line. Man, that was a wreck. If those drones were alive... So it takes... Oh. That's it. GG is called. All right, I was a little surprised there. So, okay, this is a good example of kind of the different play. I want to say different play styles, but you have kind of these three different options when it comes to StarCraft. When you're playing the game, you have either building, focus on the economy, focus on teching up, or focus on production. And so, and kind of a one way or another. But if you focus on the economy like the Zerg did over here, you can pump out a bunch of drones and expand and try to build up that economy as much as possible. But you are pretty defenseless. You are going to need, you have, if they come in for any kind of early harass, such as a group of Hellions that we saw here, even good creep spread. And a lot of air defense here. So this person looks like they were just really paranoid about getting attacked by air, uh, which did not do them any favors. You really only need one spore crawler in a mineral line, especially since you have so many. If you have a bunch of queens in order to defend that, but yeah. So the second option is building up that production, and building up that production kind of comes into two parts, and that's where you either build production buildings or you crank out units. And both serve their kind of like diverging purposes. If you build production buildings, it lets you build more units later on if you have the economy to support it, as well as reinforce your army, or just pump out units where you can actually perform an attack. And as we see here, even with, let's see, I'm gonna go back here just a little bit so we can like see what the damage in all of its entirety is. Is this about right? Okay, cool. So here we have, I'm going to slow the game down just a little bit. So this is going to be just at normal speed instead of faster. Faster is what's normally played by the players. So it's going to seem just a little bit slower and easier to manage. And the faster game mechanic or game speed basically forces players to play faster. Okay, so these spore crawlers were set down in order to defend them against these Hellions. And that is somewhat expensive for the Zerg to be able to do that, but it does save the drones. If he cancels that, he gets some minerals back, and then he can go back on the mineral line. But this here especially pulls drones off the mineral line to try to take care of these Hellions, and that did not pay well. No surround, which would have prevented these guys from being able to move around at all. So this was very frustrating for the Zerg, I can only imagine. Like, especially here. We're going to zoom in just a little bit. Not great micro for the Zerg player here. Tried to, actually. Never mind. I spoke too soon. Like there was an attempt to try to get a surround off, which would have kept these guys in place, which means that the drones would have been able to do attacks. But instead of that, these guys were able to basically shoot and scoot. And that is, when your opponent is faster than you, that is not what you want. But when you're faster than your opponent, that is exactly what you want. Speedlings do come out, wrap this up really nicely. And now, kind of an interesting note, how do you counter this, right? Is if you're a Zerg player, if you don't really follow StarCraft very much, you'll ask yourself, like, well, that just seems overpowered, especially when you're expanding. Like, what are you supposed to do against a bunch of Hellions? Zerg is actually, like, you can actually research a tech called Burrow, which basically when an enemy comes in, you can take all of your drones and you can burrow them underground. And the only thing that the Terran can do is if they have an orbital command or a Raven, they can scan that area, and that would allow those Hellions to see what's burrowed, but that limits their options on basically attacking those things. And it could actually help keep your forces alive. It is a useful tool, but it's one of those that most Zergs don't research it. It does take time. It takes, I think it's 50 minerals and 50 gas. And when you're running razor thin economic margins, that's really hard to squeeze in there. And yeah, so that was a good cheese. Well, not necessarily a good cheese, but this was just a good, I don't want to say all in, but this was a good build up by the Terran, especially, yeah, now we're going to have Liberators coming out. So Terran over here, they built up a second economy or an expansion, and then was like trickling, building up that economy while producing as much as possible. And they have the advantage in order to attack. Basically, just there's no army here. There's not much production. You do have the queens and the hatcheries, which is the Zerg production, but all they have is Zerglings and queens, which, as well as spine crawlers and spore crawlers, which could be used to hinder the opponent's movements. And you can place that pretty much anywhere. Drones could actually go and plop down and could have locked those Hellions in place. Yeah. So, anyway, good game. That was fast and it was fun.